Okay, this is Cadd 212, class 19 on November 4th. Today in class, we'll be going over information in regards to advanced sites. We'll talk about the difference between subregion and split surface, how elevations are used within a site, and how to create a parking lot. The mod for this class is now live. It's going to be final project, dormers, etc. This one right here. What'll be due for this one? Okay, as you're progressing through your model, it should include 3 10-foot wide dormers spaced evenly along the south elevation. So 10-foot wide. So it's up to you to determine the height of those. On each of the dormers and the regular roof, you're to create a standing seam metal roof on each one of those. You're to create 4 section views of your choosing. Remember, when you're creating section views, you want to show something interesting within the building. So I'll just have you create any kind of 4 section views, and we'll talk about that a little bit more after you've done them. Create an interior plan for the first floor. So as per the last class, and when we created that separate interiors, you just have to do that first floor and obviously include some components in there, be it desks or whatever, however you want to design it. And then you will have to create the site. I haven't finished those parameters yet. They'll be finished later today, but there's plenty to work on this mod. So this is going to be due November 7th. Even if you don't get everything done, submit your progress by November 7th so I can see where you're at, and then continue to work on this. So a lot of stuff that still needs to be done in class to be turned in. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into today's lesson. First thing we'll talk about is subregion versus split surface, and we'll go on from there. So we're talking about sites today. So here's my model. So I'm going to jump to site level. And you'll notice on here my elevation markers are really close to the house, even if I do change that view scale. They're still really close to the house or building model, whatever. So what I want to do is I want to just take each one and highlight them and just kind of drag them back. We kind of touched on this briefly the first half of the semester. And I want to give myself some more room on here. I want to keep them within the same plane. I don't want to move one over here because that view will not be in that viewport anymore. I just want to take them at the same and just kind of drag them right back so I have more room to create. So I'm just going to create a real quick site. Remember to create sites. We're going to massing and site, and I'm just going to do a little topo surface one over here in order to show you the difference between split surface and subregion. Just throw a couple of points in there. Let's change this to consistent color. Now, for these 2 ways to modify your site, remember you're going to go to Massing and Site tab, Modify Site, and it has it broken down pretty basic how to do it. Split surface, subregion, you can see even in the graphic that they show you the difference between the 2. And if you just kind of linger over here, it says split surface, splits a topo surface into 2 distinct surfaces so that each can be edited independently. That's the main thing to remember for split surface. For subregion, it defines an area within a topo surface. So it's just creating a subregion, as it says, of the original site itself. So how does that work? Well, we're familiar with split surface. We'll do that one first. We click on split surface, then we click on the site that we want to split, and then we'll just draw the geometry that we want to create. And finish that. And within that split surface, this piece moves separately and independently from the original. That's why we can delete this. We can create this into any other type of material that we want. Oh, that's probably not. And then if we don't like it, we can just delete it, but it will delete the entire portion of that site. So for subregion, it's basically done the same way. We want to click on subregion, make it active, and then we're going to automatically just draw the shape that we want. And that's going to create that same shape. I can still change that material of that piece. So it's a different material. And I can move it to a different location. But when I delete it, oops. The whole thing's gone. That subregion within the original region is gone, and it reverts back to the original piece of site itself. Obviously, split surface is a little bit easier to play with on here. You can manipulate it a lot more. But if you just, and one of the big differences also is split surface, you can create different levels, different elevation markers. And we'll talk about elevations a little bit, whereas subregion, that subregion will follow the shape or the elevations of the actual piece of property itself. You can't change that. So you can see anytime that you want to do something a little bit more advanced, you would want to use split surface. If you're just making like a parking lot or you know, something that you want to follow the contours of the original land, you probably want to use subregion. And as we kind of go through this and add the elevations to the site, it'll start to make a little bit more sense. Do you have to use one or the other? No, I tend to just use split surface more, especially since I can, you know, it's more manipulative, more able to be manipulated. All right. So let's go ahead and jump into the next portion, which should talk about elevations. So we don't have a lot to worry about that down here in Louisiana because everything is basically flat. But even within our flat topography, there are some undulations in the surface. So there's ways that we can create like hills or valleys and things like that in our topo surface. And also, if you get an elevation survey from a surveyor, you can create the site to follow that survey as well, which is really nice. So just for what we're going to do right now, we're going to do a basic, some basic elevations within our site. So once again, we're going to start in our site level, massing and site tab, and topo surface tool. And notice here in our options bar, we have the option to change elevations. Right now I have this particular elevation set at -8 feet. Typically when it pops up, it's going to be set to 0. So we'll just put a couple of points to create that on 0. At this point, I can start changing my elevations. Say if I wanted this to be 5 feet. And notice I do have these elevation markers that are showing up where you can see the difference in the how that site will be moving. If I wanted this to be 10 feet. And so on. Drop that back down to 0. 2. And there's no rhyme or reason why I'm picking these different heights. I'm just picking them to kind of show you how it's working. And we'll hit our green check mark. And let's go to 3D. And we've got something wacky that looks like this. So as we're progressing along, you notice that when we change the height, obviously it changed the height here. And as you create your site today, well, not today, or whenever you get a chance to create it before class, you'll be creating different elevations within your site. And that's up to you how you want to design that. You can make a couple flower beds around here or whatever. But I do want to see that you're able to create the different undulations in that site. All right, let me do like, let me go back to site level. Let's just do another little patch over here just so you can see how that's worked again. So remember, we're going to go to topo surface. Within your options bar, we can change that elevation. And you'll just change and create the elevations as you see fit. We'll hit that green check mark and we'll go to 3D to see what that new piece looks like. There we can see that we have more of a slope on that piece there. So creating the different ones, the different heights is obviously relatively easy, but how you want to design your site is going to be a little bit more difficult. And then let's go ahead and delete this. So another thing that you want to think about when you're adding these different elevations in your site is now we have to cut out that site section from the interior of the building like we did with the other sites before. And even when we do that, we're still going to have all this ground that's up high over our building and cutting into that. So we need to actually have the building itself on a level foundation. So how do we do that? Let's do that next. Similar to how we did it before when we removed the site from inside the building, what I like to do is I'll just turn it over. I think it's easier to work that way. We're going to go to split surface, click on the surface that we want to split, and create that geometry around the perimeter of the slab. And I'll go ahead and hit my green check mark. Now I don't have access to that piece of land right now. So remember, I need to get access to that. So how am I going to do that? Let's just go ahead and hide the slab. There, it's not going to let me pick that part. Let me pick that. No, always the hardest part. Okay, it did work because this is blue and this is brown. Let me go to a different angle to try and pick that. There we go. All right, with that active, I'm just going to go ahead and hit delete. Now that is gone from the interior of my building, but I still have all this ground that's up around the sides of my building, and I want this to be flat. So what do I need to do next? I'm going to go ahead and pick the site, and I'm going to go to edit surface. And you'll notice around the perimeter, let me turn this. There, we can see it a little bit better. There's all these different points around here. So what we want to do is just select the points that are around that perimeter. You can't really tell that they're active, but if you go over there, you can see that they're blue, so they are highlighted. And if I come over back to my options bar in my elevation area, it's set to, there's nothing here because all these points are at different elevations, but I want to set them all to 0. Notice how everything changed when I did that because all these points have changed that topography. Now when I hit my green check mark, that'll keep that, and then let's flip this over and see what happens. Let me put the color back on. Whoosh. Now you can see that I still have some undulations here. Is this a great topography? No, because I'm going to have like tremendous water runoff right into the building. So that's not what we're really thinking about at this point. We're just thinking about how to create it. But here we set all those points around the perimeter of the building to 0, flattened everything around it. So now that the building is on a flat surface. Say for instance, I wanted to continue like, say this is your original elevations that you receive from your surveyor, but you wanted to change some of these points so you can like level out some of this. You can go ahead and click on the site, make it active, go back to edit surface. At this point, we can place points. This elevation is set to 9 foot, but if I wanted to lower some of it, if I wanted to set it to 0, I can add a point here. Kind of pull this back, making this area 0 and lowering this. So you can go back and change this. Or if we wanted to add like a little hill or something over here, if we made that 5 foot. See how I just pulled that back a little bit more by adding those different points. So how we would integrate subregion and split surface into this again. Let's go back to our site. I'm just going to do subregion first. I'm going to pick on subregion and I'm just going to draw a region. And we see that's within the site. It follows the topography of the site. There's no way I can change it, just kind of follows that. So if I wanted to make like a road that follows this, I could go ahead and change that. But if I didn't like it there, I could just delete it and it doesn't change my original topography at all. If I wanted to create a flat road in that same space, I could go to split surface. I'd have to use split surface for that. Click on the surface that I want to split, draw the geometry that I want to create. At this point, I'd want to do the same thing as I did with the house. I'd want to pick every point that's around that spot and set that to 0. That would flatten this road so it's no longer following the undulations of the ground. See how it is here? And if I deleted it, it would delete and leave a hole there. So if you just wanted to create sidewalks that followed the natural contours of the earth, you could use subregion or split surface. But if you wanted to make that all this area flat, you would have to use a split surface tool. If you wanted to put a pool or something right here in the middle of this hill, you would want to use a split surface in order to make that area flat. So in order to make this flat, I'll just turn this over. I just think it's easier to work this way. It's up to you. I'll go ahead and click on the site, go to edit surface, and all these points that are around this little strip that I want to make flat, I'm going to set to 0 again. Hit the green check mark. Let's flip this over. So here, what happened is that all the points around this site itself are set to 0, but all the points around this piece of site are still set to different elevations, which is why it looks weird. So we still need to take this part. Let's turn it over again. Select this piece of site now, go to edit surface, Now we're going to select those same points, but they're around this piece. Set that to 0. And now let's take a look when we go back. Now you have this flat piece around here. So if you wanted to make a flat road, this would be the better option to choose. You can take that and change that to whatever material you want. And then you have that, a flat road or a flat surface in order to create that area there. So what you'll be doing, basically, you'll be using split surface to create your parking lot within that site itself. So we'll go ahead and do that now. I'm going to delete this. We'll do the whole thing over again and add a parking lot this time. Oops, don't want to delete that. All right. All right, so let's start over. Remember, I'm moving the site. This time I'm going to be adding the site. I'm going to be adding some, adding just a few different elevations to my site. And then for a portion of the site, I'm going to create a parking lot. So this is a relatively big building, so you want a relatively big space. One thing that you need to take into consideration when you're creating a parking lot, how many spots are going to be needed. We're not going to go into that calculation, but that is something that you would have to look into to determine how many spots are going to be needed. There's also, you'll need to know how many handicap spaces, ADA spaces will be needed as well. So we'll add those to this site as we'll include those in our parking lot as well, and then some other components too. But first thing we want to do is start with our site. So we're going to want to go to topo surface. On this end of my property, I'm just going to do a couple of little elevations here. Let me drop that down to 2 feet here. I'm going to put that 1 foot. And once again, no rhyme or reason behind this, just to show us some different stuff on here. .3D. All right, we've got something that kind of looks like this. This weird little pattern piece of land. All right, so the first thing I want to do is I want to remove the ground from inside my property. In order to make this a little bit easier on myself, I'm going to hide this slab first. When we get to a certain part on here, we'll go ahead and stop and restart. All right, at this point, I want to go ahead and do split surface. So click on split surface, click on the surface that I want to split, draw the shape that I want to remove. And the green check mark. When I do that, the site that is still active is going to be blue, obviously. And while it's like this, I can just hit delete and that will remove that site instead of having to hide stuff like I did before. So if we do it all at once, it makes it a little bit easier. So at this time, I still have my property at different elevations and stuff around the house. Next step is to set all these elevation points to 0, so I have the house sitting on a flat surface. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and pick the site and hit edit surface. I'm going to pick all the points around that perimeter, and I'm going to set those to 0. And finish that. Let's turn her over. So now I have all these all the property around the house is set to 0, so that's all flat now. So we've got to come in here, we've got to add a parking lot. So if we want to add a parking lot in this front part of this, let's go ahead, turn that over again. So I'm going to make this area flat right here. There's a couple different ways I could do it. I could go ahead and click on this surface. I could go to edit surface. I could place points. I could come in here, pick this point right here. Notice that sets 1 foot. I could set that to 0 and start changing the elevation like that. If I wanted to just kind of add points set to 0. Obviously that could take a little bit of a long time because you notice that the different elevation markers kind of change along the way. So it's probably an easier way to do that is to go ahead and create that split surface. So I'm going to go back to my site. And in this area right here, I'm going to create a split surface. Now click on split surface, click on the surface that you want to split, draw the shape that you want to create. So I may need to change that after, but I'm just going to draw this shape for now. It looks like I have not, this looks like it goes out of the boundary just a little bit, so it's not going to allow me to do that. So while I'm staying within the site itself, it must have just been out of fraction. It'll allow me to flatten out. If I wanted to fix this again, I'd have to go into, let's see, edit surface here, and just change these points. So just probably the best thing to do is when you're drawing this, make sure that you draw the correct shape that you want to begin with. We'll just leave that there for now. All right, so with all of these still active, I'm going to go ahead and come around and select all these points right here, select all these points and set these to 0. Notice how that flattened. And when I come back over here, I've got that section of land that's flat again. And remember, that's flat, but this is still raised. So we want to set this part to 0 as well. So this time I'm going to come back. I'm going to pick the larger part of the site, edit surface, pick those same points again. Set them to 0. Now let's flip her over. I need to go back and fix that, but the main points are that this piece is now flat, so I've created my parking lot. I don't like the way this looks in this front part. Because you can see that there's a lip there. But we'll do it again just so you can see how that'll be fixed. All right, at this time I'm going to go ahead and take this site. Well, actually, no, I won't do that. So we have the beginnings of our parking lot here in this piece. In order to do that, to start the parking lot, I'm going to go ahead and go to parking components. And if we just click on parking components, this is basically just giving you your parking spaces here. If we go over to properties in our type selector and we do the drop down here, you'll notice that there's different options, 60 degrees, 70, 90, a few different options how you want to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and use a straight 90-degree parking for here. When I come in here, I'm just going to drop this at this point just to show you. Now I can go back and I can lay out a bunch of different parking spots, or I can go ahead and click on that one that I've already put in there, and I can go to Modify tab and use my Array tool. In our options bar here, you'll notice that we have different ways that we can array something. We're going to go ahead and use the linear array. And I'm going to add 8 parking spots to it. I'm going to move to my second point. That means I'll select this point. This is my second point where I want them to start arraying from, and then they'll lay it out like that. And it'll just pop those into place, which is really nice. I obviously have a lot of room here for other parking spots, so I can go ahead and click this again, make it active. Notice when I do that, I've got this option here that I can change the number. Let's see what 16 looks like. So I can add 16. I actually have room for a little bit more if I wanted. But you can see you can just add that again. So let's do another array for parking spots. How much time we got left? Okay, after this one, we'll go ahead and drop. So one more array for parking spots. We're going to go to Masking and Site tab, Parking Component Tool. We'll use that same one, and I'm just going to drop another one, say right here. I'm going to go ahead and click on that one, go to my Array tool. I said 16 spots, set to the second one I click, so I'm going to click here, and then click here, and it's automatically going to lay out my 16 parking spots. So let's drop here and start a new video for the second half of this class. And we'll go over this again just to make sure everybody's comfortable, then open the class for questions. So let's everybody go ahead and drop, and then I'll send out a new invite shortly.